everybody. My name is Suzanne Ferguson. I am part of the legal department here at Teleperformance. I joined the company in June of this year, and I'm so happy to be here today to talk about parenting an individual with disabilities.
Great. Hi, Suzanne. Debra Charpentier, Vice President of Business Development. I'm actually on the retail, e-com, and CPG team, and I've been with the company 8 months, so glad to be here as well.
Thanks, Debra. We're celebrating this month. December is the month to celebrate individuals with disabilities. Debra and I both have some experience in the space. I am actually now raising a 20-year-old daughter named Savannah. She is adorable. She has a condition called Wolff-Hirschhorn syndrome, which is a very rare genetic disorder. The most obvious component is that she's very small. She looks about like she's 7 years old. I always tease that she's a perpetual toddler. But when she was born, neither her father nor I had any experience, any history in our families of any type of really physical or mental disability. So this is not something that was on our radar screen. We were not really prepared at all. So it really came as quite a shock, and it's been very much a learn as I go proposition. Debra, tell me about your kids.
Absolutely. So I have three children. So I have a daughter, Megan, and then we have our younger brothers who are Sam and Zach. They're twins. They just turned 25 in October. And my sons were diagnosed with autism at 18 months. So similarly to you, it was that diagnosis, but getting to that point, I think I almost feel blessed because of the fact that I had my daughter first, and my sister had four children, and so what ended up happening for me was at about 13 months, I didn't think my one son could hear. I had mentioned it to the pediatrician a few times, and I kept getting the pushback of their twins. They have their own language. It's the way they interact. But my sister is a neonatal nurse practitioner, and we pushed and we really asked, what else we could do. And so again, this was quite a while ago. Autism, I think, is much more prevalent now and at the forefront. But they were going to do a diagnosis on Sam. They said as long as we're checking Sam, we should check Zach too. And at 18 months, we got a diagnosis that they both had autism. So not prepared, very scared, and but anxious to kind of talk about this because there is a positive side, and I think that's what we're here for, is to kind of tell our story, to let everyone know that it's not the end of the world, and good things can come of it because they're wonderful young men.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I have a lot of empathy for parents of kids with autism because I know it's a difficult diagnosis process. It's not like a blood test where you get the result and it's clear cut, right? To your point, although this is 20 years ago now, Savannah's testing was challenging. The science was not where it is today, but we did know. Once we knew, we had her genetic array done, and we knew what the diagnosis was. What's interesting about Savannah is that her condition is actually quite medically complex. There are a lot of organic defects. She's had many, many surgeries. As I mentioned, she's very small, which means every part of her is very small. There's hearing impairment, there's visual impairment. But I think, like you, the biggest challenge has been kind of that cognitive, social, emotional development. Savannah was really no verbal ability whatsoever until she was about 5. And actually, when she was born, they told me that she would never walk and never talk, and that she probably wouldn't survive past 2. So we're into the gravy at this point. And she did learn to talk. She did begin to develop language. And what's interesting today is that she's very, very verbal. She never stops talking.
I love that.
Yeah, their personality is incredible. But that's part of the challenge too, is once you establish that there is some capability there, how do you foster that? How do you move your kids into?
Absolutely. And I think you and I have talked about this, right? It's not a disability, it's what are they capable of? Because, from the moment we got that diagnosis, Minnesota is they have been very proactive, and there are a lot of resources out there, but it's finding them and it's being an advocate. And so that has been a part of our journey. So, they have been in full-time, speech, occupational therapy, other programs, community programs, and things since they were very young. And I always say I don't feel that I treated them any different than I did their sister and how I raised them, and the expectations. I mean, they were definitely pushed, but I think it's been very helpful. But I have to say, one of the things that I remember, even from a young age, just trying to get them into swimming lessons. If you would say to them, okay, we're going to swimming lessons, my one son's more verbal than the other, and he would say, no, it's too dangerous, and the other son would just say no, but it's still one of their favorite things to do, that and rock climbing and skiing and all of these things. So, I think it's just looking at it from what are they capable of. And, you only know that if you push and allow them to take on that challenge.
Yeah. I think lifestyle is so important. It's one of the things that we've really benefited from here in Florida. We actually moved here. I don't want to say where I moved from, but we moved here because the schooling was terrible there. And it's great here. We have a lot of special education options in Florida, but also, it's an incredible lifestyle. And Savannah has absolutely thrived living at the beach, being in the water.
Sure.
She goes to this program down in Miami, which is 100% peer mentored. They have a private island out there. They do kayaking and sailing and fishing and all of the things. And I kid you not, I think it's probably the biggest reason that she is walking and talking as much as she is,
Yeah.
because she is with other typically developing kids every Saturday and all during the summer,
Uh-huh.
and she knows things, like she knows that she would like Harry Styles to be her boyfriend, those things that other teenage and young adult girls
Yeah.
know.
For my
And
son Sam, it's Taylor Swift. So there you
of course it is. I mean, she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me to hear you say, that they're in all these activities, because I think a lot of people hear the word disability and they think it means you don't do anything. Just not the
Yeah.
case.
No, true. It's true. I maybe just a couple things that I think are important. It's not one size fits all. I know that for sure, because as I've watched, especially with autism, right, there's a spectrum, and my sons are different on that spectrum, and so although I've tried to keep them together and I've managed to do so, it's interesting because it wasn't until later in life that I split them up in a program, and it's really healthy that I did that. But really for challenges that others might be experiencing, if you have one, it's not any easier, right? It's everything from finding a program to how do you get the funding for that program, to the transportation, and then juggling a career and other family commitments and all of those things. And so, I think as I think back on this journey and, what might be important to people is, there are a lot of services out there. I know teleperformance, we've uncovered some, and I think part of that will be shared, in this chat, where people can turn to. But maybe you and I can just share a few things. And so I don't know, Suzanne, if you want to start, but I think there are some things just, that we can both maybe throw out there that might be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, resourcing, first and foremost is the number one challenge that you have. Where do you find the resources? Where do you send your kids? How do you find help? I just recently went through the guardianship process with Savannah, which was an absolute nightmare. And hi, I'm a lawyer. It was a disaster.
Yes.
A company like Teleperformance that offers an employee assistance program that can direct you to lawyers who can help you, that can direct you to information and resources, is fantastic. I also personally, I just used the Health Advocate program, which probably many people think they have no need, but I really struggled for the last 12 years, Deborah. I have struggled to find good dental care for Savannah. Adontia is one of the challenges that come with her syndrome. It's very difficult. She has a lot of oral aversion. She does not have the right kind of teeth. They're not in the right places. And God bless these health advocate folks. They actually picked up that ball, made some calls, found a dentist that accepts our insurance, that is willing to work with Savannah on the level that she needs, they have OR privileges if they need that. It was a huge blessing, and we actually had our dentist appointment this morning, so I'm thrilled to death.
No, good for you. Good for you. I know when my kids were younger, again, I did a lot of searching for programs out there. We have the University of Minnesota here, and Fraser Institute, kind of, I think it was a blend or an offshoot of that. And then also on the county side, we had some very good preschool programs. And so, I think that obviously, the earlier diagnosis you can get, the better. As soon as you can start, I think getting that diagnosis, then you can start to find the resources, and then, they document in like IEPs, individual, performance type documentation that starts to get put in place. Those are the things I think that I didn't even realize how important those were. Because when you talk about things like insurance and things later, but also that education and funding, and even with the county. But again, I think one of the things I learned early on, embrace those people. The majority of the people that we came across are so dedicated and willing to help. And every single one, once I started to realize, how much and what an asset they are, asking them, what else should I be doing? Where else should I look? And doing those types of things, I think that's really important. And then when it came to the IEPs, I was very much, again, I use the word advocate, but reading those IEPs, reviewing those IEPs, making myself available for, those review sessions, which are mandatory by the state, but go to them and listen and participate and push back if you don't think they've accomplished these things. Because, I ended up getting some extra time through the system in their education, from K to 7. And then when COVID hit, I did the same thing. I said, no. They just missed a year and a half of what was supposed to be a hands-on program. So I got some additional time. And that becomes very important, because when you age out of the public education, system, then there are these transition programs, and those, kick in, and they're meant to teach them social skills and get them out there, potentially get a job. And there are job coaches, and there, are other types of programs to see what they're capable of. And so again, I think there's a lot of things out there, but it's just following that process. But don't adhere to that process. Again, advocate and always keep pushing and searching.
Yeah. I've kept Savannah largely in private school, so I haven't not had to deal with the IEP as much, but I have certainly written some strongly worded letters on behalf of some of my mom friends.
Right.
The one other thing I did want to mention, I don't think you and I have even talked about this, but most states have what's called a Medicaid waiver program, where you can get Medicaid for your child, and they sort of waive the requirement that you be low income, right? And this was such a wake up call for me, because when Savannah was about 6 months old, somebody presented it to me as an option. And I remember, first of all, I was completely overwhelmed when she was 6 months old. So I was trying to push away anything that I could. But I just remember thinking, well, I have a good job. I have health insurance. Probably there are other people that need this more than me. And so I didn't do it. And when she was about 18 months old, one of her physical therapists actually did a little intervention with me. And they said, I don't know how much money you think you make, but you are never going to make enough to give a child everything that she needs. And so I ultimately did pursue the Medicaid waiver first, where the state where we lived, and now here in Florida. And I'm always surprised at how many parents don't even know this exists. This is what it picks up. It picks up our copays on our insurance, right? It provides in-home care. I have an in-home caregiver that helps when I'm here at work, that can get Savannah to and from school, that can get her out in the community and keep her engaged and involved. It pays for some therapies that are not covered by insurance. It's really quite an incredible program. It is a little bit of work to get on it. Many states have a waiting list, and you do have to be that sort of fierce advocate to say, it's my child that needs this also. But that's, to your point about county services, that's typically administered through your county health and human services or Department of Children and Family or something like that. So that's an incredible resource as well.
That is, as far as the public schools too. So when my sons entered seventh grade, it was the high school, and so that was they had been in the public school program, which had been fine. Once they got into the seventh grade, that particular school just did not have anything for autism. There weren't even. It was like they blended kind of everyone they thought had a disability. I guess that's the best way to put it. At that point, I pulled them out and found a charter school that was for autism. It still fell under Minnesota public school guidelines. You had to win a lottery to get in it. It's very much in demand, but those programs exist and they were life-changing. And that actually did transition to move them forward into the transition program that was, again, accredited by that school. So that was awesome. Once they got through that, I have, again, there are things out there. It's digging. It never stops. The program I have them in now, they've been in for the past year and a half, and it's a community-based program. It's meant to, again, hone in on social skills, potentially, it's absolutely get them out in the community, get them active, and then, hopefully get them a job, trying to see what their skill set is as they're going through, these daily activities. And then one other thing I think is really neat, we're kind of covering some of the bases here of things that are important to us and how valuable they are. Even again, I mentioned the transportation side. It's difficult. They have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it ends at 4, and so there's no leeway. You've got to be there within 15 minutes on either side. And so metro mobility, I don't know if it's that terminology is used across the country, but that's not an option because it fluctuates. But I found a program in our state called Uplift, and it's almost like a Lyft or an Uber for people with disabilities, but you can schedule it. Again, it's funded by the county. As I've gotten them in there, I had to find it, advocate for it, and show the value. But it works unbelievable because they are picked up at 7:30. They're dropped off at about 4:15, 4:30. And it allows us to keep our life in order. So yeah, I think I view that as a positive. But again, it's there's not a playbook.
Yeah.
There's not a playbook. You kind of have to write your own playbook.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've done the same.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I know we talked about the transportation before, and now I'm just remembering this lady cut me off in Carline the other day, and she must have been part of one of these services because she did not really know what was going on with Carline, but God bless her anyway. She dropped off her charge and went about her way. I do, I am encouraged by how many resources are available, and I think of so many parents. I mean, once we know that we can do for our kids, we can create for them a full and fulfilling and vibrant life. Of course, we do what we have to get it done. And I think you and I are fortunate, right, that we have the kinds of jobs that enable us to have some flexibility, to have not only the financial wherewithal, but also the intellectual wherewithal to really advocate for ourselves and push for some of those things. And I consider myself very blessed. I did want to just touch on one thing that you mentioned earlier about community, right, for our kids. Because one of the things I think that still catches me off guard is I still sometimes have people asking me, well, what's wrong with her? Or what do I tell my kids about her? And it always shocks me. I mean, I guess I could just answer and say, well, she has this condition, it's hard to pronounce, but when I look at her, I don't see maybe anything wrong with her. I just think she's a person. And so I'm wondering if you have this experience with your sons or, what is their socialization like?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, that has always been there, right? From the time they were young. You know, well, some of the kids didn't see it as much But as you know, it's some of the parents, or as they started to get older, and even like loud noises, they'd have to wear headphones. And so, yeah, to your question, you get, or what you're saying is, what's wrong with your child? How do I speak to your child? What should I tell my children? And I think I always just start with the basics. I mean, they have autism, and then you try to explain a little bit about what that is. But I what I find very hard or frustrating is when adults, they don't even know how to talk to them. I mean, talk to them like you would talk to any other child, interact with them in the same manner. But I don't know that that ever gets easier. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know that it ever gets easier. When they were younger, we created kind of a little book that, we would give to our friends to give to their children or read to their children, to try to explain it. Because I think that's important. And you want them to be treated the same, but they are a little different. And what's the word that people always use? They're not typical children. Well, all children are different, and all people are different. So, but I think it's really just not being afraid to answer the question and just be upfront.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
It's the same for me. What's interesting about Savannah is she actually does prefer to interact with adults over children. And so she really will sort of pursue interaction to points where it can become a little uncomfortable,
Mhm.
And I'm fortunate where we are. We live in a very tight-knit community. Everybody here sort of knows her. They call
Yeah.
her the mayor of Manatee Bay. Most people are really kind and sweet to her. But I just find it, interesting, especially like maybe we're at the grocery store, right? And she sees somebody that she finds interesting. Maybe she sees that they're buying dog food. I don't know. Something about her has has caught her attention, and she will try and talk to them, and most people will respond. But some people are just kind of, I don't want to say rude because maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're just trying to get their dog food and go home. But she does not really understand that lack of interaction. And so, I always try to be gentle with her and say, oh, they're maybe very busy or maybe distracted, right? They just didn't want to have that conversation with you. Um, but it's interesting because she is like a very empathetic individual. And so if she sees somebody that's angry or sad, we have to stop and deal with that all the
Oh,
time.
absolutely. They are sensitive. That's very similar. My children are very sensitive, and it's especially if a baby's crying or something, they don't understand it, and it makes them upset. So, and then they'll yell, and then you've got to try to calm them down and diffuse the situation. But and then they also have a fear of animals, any animal, a little puppy, whatever it is. And you can't, you try to explain that to people. If you're going to someone's house or you're in a restaurant and they come in walking in with a dog, if it's a pet friendly, and just to try to explain that, and sometimes it can be difficult and challenging, but yeah, it's just I guess from meeting you and getting to know you over the past couple of months. I mean, I think we both have similar stories, and I think similar approaches. And what I love about you is when you speak about Savannah, it's you light up, and I do the same. And so that, yeah,
I was
it's a
thinking,
wonderful.
I never want to suggest to anybody that raising a kiddo with special needs is easy or that you should, if you're feeling challenged, there must be something wrong with you. No, like it's
Oh,
100%
true.
challenging. But also it's very funny, right? If you keep your sense of humor about you,
Yeah.
it's such an adventure. I mean, our kids are uh, like life is like Disney World every single day because you never
Mhm.
know what's coming, and most of even the terrible things are fixable. And they bring such a light with them that I feel like yes, it's a challenge, but also it's such an incredible blessing.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that God gave me that one, you know.
Oh, yeah, me too. I know they are a blessing. And I think here's the thing, and I think I'll reiterate what you said. It is not without its challenges, and they can be daily, and there can be phases where it's more challenging than the next. And I am a realist, and I know as they get older, and quite frankly, as I get older, it's trying to plan ahead. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Um, but I will go back to, I don't know that that's any different than the way I look at, my daughter's obviously much more independent and things like that, but you never stop worrying about your children. So with that, I want to just say, if there's anybody out there, I hope that we've given you a little, ray of sunshine and hope. And, we will make sure that incorporated with our video here are some resources and things like that. So, yeah, glad we were able to talk today.
Thank you so much, Debra. Thanks for including me. This has been a lot of fun. And
Thank you.
Debra said, we're going to have some health advocate resources, but if any questions that we can answer for you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Thanks, Suzanne. Nice talking with you today.
Bye.
Bye.